Coming up on At Issue.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I do hereby move you, sir, that the 2016 regular session of the Mississippi House of Representatives stand adjourned, sine die.
You're recognized. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. No. The ayes have it.
That's a wrap. The 2016 legislative session comes to a close. At Issue starts right now. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. And we want you to share your opinions and comments with us. Just go to facebook.com/MPB Online News. Our Twitter handle is @MPB News. Also visit our webpage, mpbonline.org/issue. And you can check us out, MPB News, all your favorite shows on our new MPB app. It is free to download for your Apple or Android device. The 2016 Mississippi legislative session is complete, and we'll talk about the highlights of the session in just a moment. Before lawmakers headed back to their respective districts, we spoke with two House members, Republican Andy Gibson and Democrat Alice Clark, to get their thoughts on how things went.
I'm very pleased the way the session's turned out. It's been, let's face it, a very stressful, difficult, and probably one of the hardest legislative sessions I've ever been a part of. But at the end of the day, I feel like we passed very significant legislation, conservative legislation for the people of Mississippi, legislation that supports Mississippi values, family values, legislation that supports conservative fiscal policy.
This has been a most difficult year. I've been here 31 years this month, and of the years that I've been here, this has been one where so many of us are leaving without anything for our constituents. And that's very, very difficult. None of us like going home without doing what we had hoped we would do for our constituents.
Governor Bryant has said he expects to call a special session later this year to decide how to spend $110 million the state will get from the BP oil spill settlement. Before heading home, lawmakers had to hammer out a state budget for fiscal year 2017. The $6.3 billion spending plan includes deep cuts to state agencies ranging anywhere from 2 to 12%. Lawmakers had hoped to find additional savings by consolidating some state agencies, but that plan did not pass this session. We spoke with House Appropriations Committee Chairman Herb Frierson about the budget.
I mean, it's a tough budget, and it was very hard on a lot of agencies. And, you know, as I've said earlier, there's going to be unintended consequences anytime you make these kind of cuts, but it's balanced and it's structurally balanced, and I feel like it's going to put the state in a position to deal with whatever problems they may face in the future. And if the growth comes back in revenue, they're even in a better position because we haven't kicked the can down the road, to sort of say. You know, we made the tough decisions this year, and it's not pretty, but it's the best we could do under the circumstances.
Governor Bryant has ordered a smaller $25 million budget cut for state agencies in addition to the 1.5% cut ordered earlier this year. Well, despite lower state revenue collections, lawmakers voted in favor of cutting taxes. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves talked about the benefits of the so-called Taxpayer Pay Raise Act.
Obviously thrilled that we were able to do comprehensive tax reform, that we were able to pass the largest tax cut in the history of Mississippi. We did it in a responsible way in which we delayed the implementation for a year and that we phased it in over 10 years. We should be focused on growing our state's economy, not growing government. And I think this is a plan that puts more money in people's pockets, and that's something that I am very, very pleased by, and I think there are an awful lot of people in this building, as evidenced by the large bipartisan vote in both chambers to pass the Taxpayer Pay Raise Act of 2016.
Not everyone understands how the state can cut taxes while revenues are millions of dollars behind projections and state agency budgets are being cut. MPB's Desiree Frazier recently sat down with Corey Wiggins, the director of the Hope Policy Institute in Jackson, to talk about the issue.
Corey, thank you for joining us, being with us here today. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me.
Let's talk about the state budget. How do you feel about the budget that came out during this legislative session?
When you look at the state budget, I always think about who benefits, who's hurt, what are some opportunities that exist for working families across the state. And the way the budget at its time looks, a lot of families across the state are going to be put in positions where it looks like they're going to continue to struggle. Particularly when you think about a lot of families across the state that are sitting around their kitchen table trying to figure out how to pay bills in their household, how to be able to provide for their kids. But at the macro level, in terms of what's going on in our state budget, a lot of those decisions that are happening and that happened during this session are going to impact them. And you know, my viewpoint and my standpoint is it's going to impact them negatively in the long term.
We saw millions in cuts, and we also, to state agencies, by the way,
Yeah.
and we also saw millions in tax cuts.
Yeah.
What is that going to do to our budget?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from a budget standpoint, you know, in terms of what we look at with our economic projections in terms of our budget being down, when you look at it in about 2 years, these tax cuts are to go into effect, which is going to reduce about when fully phased in, is going to reduce about $417 million in revenue for the state. But then you have to ask and stand back, what of those services that are going to be cut, how are these state agencies who are supporting and providing services to many folks across the state, how will they be impacted?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Cuts across the board. We've got agencies that are having a tough time. Department of Health.
Yeah. The Department of Health is one. Recently, I just saw a report that came out about the Department of Health talking about the Zika virus, right? And so you think about public health issues that arise, whether it's Zika virus or issues around having clean, safe drinking water. A lot of these sort of functions of doing these types of inspections around food, child care facilities fall within the State Department of Health. So if they're looking at budgetary constraints and cuts, and then on top of that, in the long term, we'll potentially see a reduction in revenue, that limits the services that the State Health Department can do to provide and support and protect people's health. When you consider the fact that part of one of the components of the tax cut was the elimination of the 3% income bracket, the lower bracket on the income tax code, well, a lot of that sort of particular cut benefits mostly or more wealthier folks. When you think about lower income folks who may not make enough money to qualify or get that break, but they still spend a considerable amount of money in sales taxes, in gas tax. So what are we going to do for those individuals who are on the lower end of the economic ladder, who's trying to work themselves up, who need some relief and some breaks and opportunities themselves?
Corey Wiggins, the director of the Hope Policy Institute. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
No, thank you.
So how do Mississippi's state budget issues compare to our neighbors to our west in Louisiana? Joining us now is Stephen Procopio. He's the policy director for the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. It's a nonpartisan watchdog group. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Procopio. Our state has lower than expected revenue collections. Lawmakers are cutting state agency budgets here, while at the same time cutting taxes. Are there similarities in how lawmakers in Louisiana are handling the state budget there?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. There are similarities in that now that taxes have been cut, then hard decisions are going to have to be made. Right now they're looking at serious cuts in the state budget or having to come back and replace that revenue with additional taxes. One difference is, from what I understand, Mississippi is cutting their taxes in a time that revenues are sort of falling off. Louisiana really cut their taxes after Katrina. There was a surge of revenue as people used their insurance money to replace appliances and other things, and that increased state revenue. And people thought, well, we have that money, let's go ahead and give it back to taxpayers. And that was sort of short-lived. And since then, it's been a series of sort of one-time money or other patches to get us through. And now that we have a different governor, he's trying to fix the structural problem that we're spending more on than we're taking in revenue.
So what is the current state of affairs there? What all is the governor trying to fix?
Well, we had coming into next year about a $2 billion budget deficit. in a special session that the governor called, he was able to raise about $1.2 billion. And with some other things, we're looking at about a $750 million shortfall right now. That is the governor's proposed cutting a very popular tuition assistance program for higher education. He's proposed closing some state hospitals. He's proposed cutting some prisons and money that's sent to sheriffs, as well as also cuts just sort of across the board. So it's some fairly serious cuts that are left, and he's looking to have another special session to raise revenue. Not necessarily taxes, but maybe looking to get rid of some exemptions and credits that individuals and corporations use. And hopefully that might be able to get us close enough, plus with some cuts. I think that's the current plan, although that's still playing out in the legislature.
What lessons do you think Mississippi might be able to learn from what's happening in Louisiana?
I think an important lesson is if you're going to cut taxes, which is fine, and there are some taxes, and I think some of the ones that y'all cut, the franchise tax and the inventory, we have the same issues here. They're very pernicious taxes. They're fine to get rid of. What you don't want to do is then have no plan on how you're going to deal with that. You should have a plan, either replace it with different types of revenue, a broader base, or you should have a plan to how you're going to deal with that with the spending cuts. I got to only imagine that's harder when revenue overall is falling. What you don't want to do is use gimmicks. You don't want to use wishful thinking and say, well, we're going to cut taxes and that will pay for itself, because they never pay for themselves. They might long-term help out, but you really should have a plan on how this is going to get done. The same thing happened in Louisiana, where we cut it in a time of surplus, and there wasn't a long-term plan of how we were going to handle it when that sort of short-term post-Katrina boom went away.
Thank you for your insight, sir. We've been talking with Dr. Stephen Procopio, the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana, joining us from Baton Rouge. Thank you, sir. We move now to the Reporter's Notebook with MPB's Paul Boger. Paul, good to have you with us again. Let's start with the budget. Are these numbers not exactly what we think they are?
Well, that's a really good question, because we know we have about a $6.3 billion budget. However, there is confusion about what the numbers are. Last weekend, lawmakers decided that they wanted to include some special funds into the general fund budget, and do some things to really kind of help bolster the budget, I guess. The problem is that the numbers aren't quite matching up to what they say they are. We know that there are major cuts to state agencies. It's not hard to figure that out, but we're not quite sure, exactly where the budget's at this point. I would really challenge a lot of lawmakers to really tell me what are the budgets of some of these agencies you cut, and I would be willing to guarantee that they don't know, because the numbers just really, they're very strange, not quite adding up the way they should.
But in the end, they've got to add up. We've got to.
In the end, there is a budget there, and there is an exact number. But I think a lot of folks don't quite know what it is still, almost a week later.
Let's talk about legislation that dealt specifically with some issues here in the capital city of Jackson. We had the airport bill that passed that essentially gives some more regional control to the airport instead of total control by the city. The sort of flip side of that was this capital complex bill that would address some infrastructure problems and fix some infrastructure problems around the capital area. That bill failed.
Right. There's this argument that the folks in the capital city make that there's a lot of state agencies, a lot of state-owned buildings here in the capital city that the state doesn't pay property tax on it, that therefore these buildings, these folks who work in these buildings that necessarily don't live in Jackson are coming here using the resources, using the infrastructure, but not really doing anything to help pay for it. To correct that, some lawmakers created this capital complex, essentially the area from UMC, which is in closer to Northeast Jackson down to JSU, Central Jackson, would become part of the Capitol complex, and the state would give a certain amount of money to the city of Jackson to help pay for those infrastructure repairs. Now, there would be an oversight committee, there would be these other things to make sure that the money was being used correctly. However, through the conference process, through the negotiation progress, it became a really convoluted bill, in so much as that it also started giving Capitol Police jurisdiction over that area that JPD wouldn't have anymore. Furthermore, it also created this random judicial center that a judge would have, would oversee criminal investigations or criminal proceedings in that Capitol complex. So if somebody got arrested in that Capitol complex, somebody who lived in the Bellhaven area of Jackson, they would go to that Capitol complex judge rather than a Jackson judge.
So it got a little more complex.
Got convoluted,
than it was
got
intended,
complex,
perhaps, and died.
And it died.
Divorce. There was a move afoot to add domestic violence to the list of criteria for being grounds for getting a divorce, and that failed.
Right. I think this one was a little strange, and no one really expected this one particularly to die. What happened again during the conference committee that there was an add-on that allowed neglect or abandonment for 2 years to be considered a grounds for divorce. That brought a lot of folks saying, hey, is this abandonment? Is this considered abandonment? Going to prison for 2 years, is that considered abandonment? So there was a lot of concern that this would create an unjustified grounds of divorce. No one really questioned the domestic violence portion of it. I think a lot of folks said, hey, that's great, but you can't have one without the other in this bill. And so that eventually was what killed it.
Well, it might be one we see again next year, perhaps in more simplified form. Paul Boger, thank you, as always.
Thank you.
Well, lawmakers in the House avoided a vote on a conference committee report on the campaign finance reform bill this week. Many House members questioned the way House Bill 797 specified election officials would be allowed to spend campaign money, what would be prohibited, and the penalties for breaking the law.
So we're gonna magnify, micromanage, and overlook our campaign contributions of $200, but I may get a several $1,000 gratuity trip to wherever to do whatever, and I don't have to report that. That's what you're telling me?
I think that's the current law, gentlemen.
But y'all are attempting to solve some obvious problems that we have with lobbyists and holding political office and who's donating to who. Why wouldn't we want to shed some light on this particular situation?
Well, gentlemen, you answered your question. We're attempting to solve some of the problems. Obviously, this doesn't solve all of them. And I mean, I see this as a great first step and a step forward on campaign finance, but that's all it is.
And that brings us to the point with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Austin Barber is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of Clearwater Group. Glad to have both of you with us again on that issue. Let's start with campaign finance reform. I keep saying report. Campaign finance reform. There seemed to be some momentum, especially backed by this investigation or this look at it by the Clarion Ledger, and yet it didn't pass. And there seemed to be a lot of support for it. Are you surprised, Brandon, that some form of it didn't go through?
At this point in the session, Wilson, what is surprising anymore, but this was an embarrassing failure. There's no excuse for Mississippi not to have thoroughgoing campaign finance regulations that mirror what's going on in other states, and things as simple as closing that loophole where members take whatever funds are in their campaign account home with them. That's a big one. And then also that issue of paying big amounts to credit cards and not itemizing those amounts. I think those are common sense measures. I'm glad the Senate passed it out. They're to be commended for that. I appreciate Representative Wilson carrying that bill to the floor, but this is absolutely embarrassing.
Yeah, I'm really surprised this did not get done. I think it will be an issue that will get done very quickly next session. We need transparency. There's no doubt about this. We need transparency in campaign finance, but what we also need is we need to not limit the ability for individuals, corporations, unions, whoever it is, to be able to participate in this process. It's their First Amendment right. And I've always said, I've said it right here, we ought to have no limits, but full transparency and full reporting. And I think that's what we need to find a system to do that. And it will be good for every elected official in the state of Mississippi if the legislature can move forward with this. And I bet it gets done first thing as a big priority next year. I hate it didn't happen this year.
Because they're essentially voting on new rules to impose on themselves. I mean, what's it going to take? What's got to be different, though, if you say that you hope they'll do it quickly next year? They didn't do it this year.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Don't try to get me to figure out exactly what's going through the mind of elected elected official sometimes. Well, I'll kick it over to my colleague who actually sat on the House floor and see what he has to say.
You know, we've had some weeks where we've been talking about these social issues, and you see these legislators come up and they have this solemn look on their face like they just left a church service. They talk about how serious this was. If you go back and see the transcript from the discussion about campaign finance reform, it was a joke. They were making jokes. They were all tongue-in-cheek.
Both sides
Why
of the
would we
aisle,
regulate
Republican
ourselves?
and Democrats.
Embarrassing.
It's not
That is embarrassing. I don't think the public at this point, with our economy in the tank and with all the various issues that we're facing at the kitchen table, want to see politicians making jokes about how they are completely unregulated and it's the Wild West with our campaign finance.
Let's move on to the budget. Speaking of the Clarion Ledger again, there was a front page editorial this week that said, stop the madness. Essentially, there's a call from not just the Clarion Ledger, but from others that it's not wise to cut taxes in an environment where revenue is down. Is it a mistake to cut taxes in such conditions?
Well, here's my thought on this, okay? And I think this is, you have to go back and look at this, even from 100,000 feet versus just 40,000 feet. You have to look at both Tate Reeves and Philip Gunn and their leadership. And it's very clear what they're saying. These are our ideological beliefs, okay? We need to have our prioritization on how we're going to spend money, which is clearly education, Medicaid, infrastructure, particularly education. We believe in less government, okay? We think there are more efficient ways to provide these services, whether it's DQ or Medicaid or MDA or whoever it is, or the Department of Education, and we want to give more money back to people to invest it. And of course, we got to have a safety net for single mothers, the poor, and the elderly. I think that is what they're saying. We can provide these main services that are our big priorities for less money. And at the same time, we can give people more of their money back in tax cuts. Now, I believe that way, and it's clear that they believe that way, and it's clear the Clarion Ledger doesn't believe that way. But I applaud them for them sticking to their guns and saying, this is what you elected us to do, and this is what we're going to do.
You know, from the floor of the House, Ways and Means Chair Jeff Smith essentially admitted that this was not about the little guy. This was about corporations. This was a big corporate tax cut. It was more giveaways to corporate donors. The governor essentially said in his post-game wrap-up, we're going to try to do something for the little guy maybe next time around. But this time it was mostly for business. You know, we've got a person who we just talked to, an economist out of Louisiana. They're flat busted in Louisiana. They're almost in a state of receivership. And he's giving us advice on how not to fall off the cliff. This is bad. And I don't know if the optics could be any worse than you pass this thing that we're beating our chest about, and the next day the governor has to make half percentage cuts across the board. We look foolish. This is going to be something that causes greater tax increases down the line. I hope it feels good in the moment. I hope everybody enjoys the tax cut that none of us will be seeing, but I suppose some German corporations will be enjoying. But in 8 years, perhaps sooner, the bill's going to come due, and we are going to have to pay more taxes than we were paying the day before this thing passed.
So this is just where Brandon and I disagree. We can have a serious conversation and not get mad at each other. We'll get mad at each other after the show. but this is where I totally disagree. For the franchise tax, $260 million is what goes into the franchise tax pot into the general fund budget every year. That's $260 million. There's 65,000 entities throughout the state. Some are big. Some are the Nissans of the world. Well, they actually got theirs exempt when they came through. But some are big corporations, but some are very small. We're talking about 65,000 in every county, even in my home county of Yazoo County, that are paying this. $260 million. And the way I see that, using sort of simple common sense here, is that's $260 million every year that those entities can invest back in their business, can give their employees a higher salary, and can go hire new employees. And then one thing very quickly, as sort of giving the little man a tax cut, that's what they did with a 3% income tax. That's $150 annually. Not a lot of money, but it's $150 back to someone to buy their kids school supplies, because it's the 3% tax bracket on the income tax.
Yeah, but it's a corporate tax, and everybody knows it. Jeff Smith said it. It's 3 times a help for those entities that don't need the help, frankly, than it is for the little guy. And this business about this kind of trickle-down notion, I thought we had blown that up, but it seems to be making a comeback. That has never worked. We're $122 million in the hole this year. With this tax cut, we're now at $780 million in tax cuts. This is reckless. I heard Speaker Gunn say after it was over, they said, how can you justify all this? He said, well, I'm not going to apologize for being a Republican. Maybe not, but he ought to apologize for being real bad at his job.
Well, again, it's going to be phased in every 10 years. They waited 2 years before they start so they could continue to monitor revenue numbers. But look, again, this is why these people were elected. They were elected because of what is their political philosophy on what do you do with government. And they believe we're going to set our priorities, and there's a lot of waste in government. There's money that particular agencies don't need. You don't agree with that, I know, but and I do agree with that, and we'll see. One of us is going to be right, and I hope it's whichever one of us is right. It's going to be best for the state of Mississippi.
Well, I think Austin and I talk about this stuff a lot. I sincerely want our state to succeed, and I recognize our party doesn't have all the right ideas, and I would like nothing more than for this to come out successful. But I'm afraid in this instance, conservative budget must be Latin for dumpster fire, because I really think we're going to have a trouble digging our way out of this.
Just one last point on this. The real priority has to continue to be, how do we create an environment that's favorable for job creation. We've got to continue to do things like lower our taxes, fair regulation, a fair legal climate, and then of course the biggest priority for me is we have to figure out how do we have a better educated workforce, which has been the biggest priority for this Republican leadership in the House.
We'll have to leave it right there, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on At Issue. We'll be back next week.